So, get this. Two people can spend the exact same amount of money on a luxury watch this year and end up with completely different experiences. One gets a watch that becomes more valuable every time he wears it. The other gets a watch he struggles to sell 6 months later. And in 2026, that difference matters more than ever. 10 Longines. Walk into a gray market dealer in New York or London and try to trade in your Longines. See what happens. Most won't take it. Not because it's a bad watch, because a Longines sitting in a display case doesn't move. It doesn't generate conversation. It doesn't make the person standing next to it look more interesting. In the American market especially, Longines is the luxury watch you wear alone. That's a brutal thing to say about a brand founded in 1832, and it wasn't always true. For most of the 20th century, Longines was deeply respected, a precision watchmaker with aviation timing credentials and a heritage that stretched back to some of the most consequential moments in competitive sport. They timed the 1896 Athens Olympics. They built movements that went into watches bearing other names. The craft was real. So when did real stop being enough? Somewhere around the mid-2010s, Swatch Group decided the brand needed to move up market. Entry-level became mid-level. Mid-level crept toward aspirational, and the prices followed. The Longines Legend Diver, once retailing for $2,500, now sits at $3,850 on a bracelet. That's a 54% price increase. And according to Morgan Stanley's 2025 tracked data, average secondary sale prices fell 3.1% in just the second quarter of that year alone. Here's what that gap looks like in practice. You walk out of an authorized dealer having spent nearly $4,000 on a Spirit or a Legend diver. A year later, a dealer on Chrono 24 is asking $1,800 for the same reference. The spread between what you paid and what you'd recover isn't a market dip. It's the permanent distance between Longines' self-image and what the secondary market actually thinks of it. And the community knows. On Watch You Seek, the thread says it plainly. They're just tired. Great watches, terrible resale. Gray market and brick-and-mortar dealers reportedly refuse Longines and trade outright. Not because something went wrong with the movement, because there's nobody waiting on the other side to buy it. There's something specific about what Longines lost that goes beyond resale data. Brand desire isn't about specifications. It's about whether the person across from you at dinner recognizes what you're wearing and feels something. Longines built precision for over a century. It didn't build that. And now, the price point asks you to pay for a conversation the watch can't start. The story of Longines in 2025 isn't a collapse. It's a price migration that left the value proposition behind. They raised the ticket without raising the desire, and the market noticed before most buyers did. Longines priced itself out of its own audience. The next brand had a different problem. It priced itself into the wrong one. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. That's why I created a complete insider guide to buying watches. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. 9. Panerai. There is a specific type of collector who discovered Panerai in the early 2000s and never looked back. They built wrist rolls around it, wore the 44mm Luminor 9050 to beach barbecues and board meetings with equal confidence. For a while, Panerai wasn't just a watch. It was a personality type. That moment has passed. The secondary market tells the story with the kind of bluntness brands prefer to avoid. Average pre-owned Panerai prices in 2025 sat at $6,222, down from $7,125 in 2024. That's nearly a $900 drop in a single year. Meanwhile, trading volume more than doubled, which means the market isn't just falling, it's flooding. When a brand's secondary volume surges and its prices fall at the same time, that's not demand. That's owners getting out. Panerai was always a niche proposition. The oversized cushion cases, the crown-protecting lever, the dial so spare it borders on aggressive. None of it was designed for broad appeal. And that was fine when the niche was devoted and the prices reflected the conversation. But Richemont's pricing strategy over the last decade turned Panerai into something the watch community quietly resents, a brand charging for exclusivity it no longer actually provides. Walk into a Panerai boutique today. The entry point is somewhere around $5,000. For a watch that will trade pre-owned at roughly $3,000 the day you walk out. That's a 40% haircut before you've worn it twice. I keep coming back to this one. The Luminor is still an interesting object. The movement architecture has improved over the past decade. The brand's Italian military heritage, Royal Navy dive watches, built to be functional to the point of austerity, is real, not manufactured for marketing. But none of that changes the math. When a brand's most loyal secondary market customers are selling out, the product hasn't failed them. The pricing strategy has. Picture the collector who bought a PAM 00111 in 2017 because the watch said something he couldn't quite explain. He still owns it. He still likes it. But he looked at Chrono 24 last month and saw what it was asking. He didn't list it. He closed the tab. Some losses you just decide not to count. At least Panerai has heritage it can point to. The next brand on this list has something else, a marketing budget the size of a small country. 8 TAG Heuer, the middle of the catalog. Say TAG Heuer Monaco to someone who follows watches, and they'll nod. Square case, Le Mans, Steve McQueen wearing it sideways in a 1971 race film. The Monaco is real. The Carrera Heuer 02 is real. The brand's motorsport timing history, from the oscillating pinion patent in 1887 to Formula One timing in the 1960s, is real, and it earns its price. But TAG Heuer isn't just the Monaco. It's also the Aquaracer, the Formula One quartz, the connected smartwatch. And those 3 products are where the brand's value proposition quietly disintegrates. A TAG Heuer Aquaracer, bought new from an authorized dealer, depreciates roughly 10% per year for 3 consecutive years, according to data tracked by multiple UK resellers. One Watch You Seek member documented it clearly. An Aquaracer 300M purchased new for $1,800 resold a year later for $950, half its value, gone. The Connected series has an even faster clock running against it. Smartwatch operating systems age out. Battery chemistry degrades. Software support windows close. TAG Heuer priced the Connected at several $1,000s for a product that is, by technological definition, obsolete within 5 years. That isn't a watch. That's a lease you didn't know you were signing. But here's what makes this complicated. The problem isn't the brand, it's the catalog. TAG Heuer has always tried to be 2 things simultaneously: a serious horological house with motorsport heritage and a volume brand accessible to buyers stepping up from fashion watches. For decades, that tension worked. The Carrera anchored credibility at the top. The Aquaracer and Formula One paid the bills at the bottom. The brand could point up and deliver down. What changed is that the bottom no longer holds its price, and the top no longer differentiates strongly enough from what Tudor does for less money. And Tudor is owned by Rolex. So when a buyer has to choose between a Tudor Black Bay for $3,000 and a TAG Heuer Aquaracer for $2,500, one of those offers in-house movement technology and a secondary market that holds. The other doesn't. Which TAG Heuer you own matters more than whether you own a TAG Heuer. The community figured that out years ago. New buyers are still catching up. TAG Heuer's problem is a split personality. The next brand has a simpler diagnosis. It mistook being seen for being valued. 7 Hublot. In 2004, Jean-Claude Biver took over a struggling Hublot and did something that changed the watch industry. He fused materials that weren't supposed to exist together, rubber and gold, carbon fiber and ceramic, and built a watch that looked like nothing else on the market. The original Big Bang was brash, loud, and completely unignorable. It was the right watch for 2005. It is not the right watch for 2025. The problem with Hublot isn't that the watches are bad. It's that they're only good at one thing, being noticed. And in 2025, the people who want to be noticed wearing a watch have largely moved on. The same energy that made the Big Bang feel bold in the early 2000s, the conspicuous size, the heavy bezel screws, the general announcement of "look at me," now reads as a different era entirely. Not wrong, just finished. The secondary market has been saying this for years. Hublot's Big Bang series loses between 40 and 60% of its retail value within 12 months of purchase, according to data aggregated from Watch Charts and Chrono24. The Classic Fusion performs only marginally better. When you're paying $10,000 to $30,000 retail, a 60% loss in year one isn't a depreciation curve, it's a verdict. And the collector community is direct about why. At serious auction venues, Phillips, Sotheby's, Christie's, Hublot is essentially absent from the catalogs that matter. The brand doesn't appear in the rooms where watches are coveted and fought over. It appears in Instagram posts. It appears in hip-hop references. Both of those things made Hublot commercially successful. Neither of them made it respected. Fratello Watches described the brand in a 2024 analysis as low horology at high horology prices. That's not a dismissal. It's a structural observation. Hublot charges for finishing it doesn't provide. It charges for heritage it largely invented. And the movement technology inside the cases, for most of the catalog, doesn't justify the retail ask when you compare it to what Omega or even Tudor delivers at a fraction of the price. There is one honest thing about Hublot. It never pretended to be something it wasn't. The Big Bang told you exactly what it was the moment you looked at it. The problem is what it told everyone else. Hublot peaked in 2005. The next brand peaked even earlier and fell even further. 6. Blancpain. Some brand collapses are loud. Store closures, lawsuits, headlines. Blancpain's is quiet. A percentage point here. A Watch Charts quarterly report that lands with a number nobody inside Swatch Group particularly wants to discuss. In September 2025, Blancpain was the worst performing tracked brand in the entire secondary watch market, down 12.6% year to date. The 50 Fathoms, historically one of the most respected dive watches in existence, arguably the first modern sports dive watch ever built, fell 10.7%. The Villeret fell 16.9%. That Villeret number deserves more attention than it gets. The Villeret is a dress watch of serious quality, ultra-thin movements, exceptional hand finishing, Geneva striped bridges, beveled edges. The kind of craft that separates the Swatch Group's premium tier from everything else it makes. This was the watch that justified Blancpain sitting above Omega in the portfolio hierarchy. And it lost nearly a fifth of its secondary value in less than a year. There's a type of collector who bought Blancpain for exactly that reason. Not for status, not for resale, because the Villeret represented what could happen when a large group stopped trying to sell to everyone and made something for someone who actually knew what they were looking at. That collector is now sitting on an asset that the market values significantly less than he paid, and finding it harder to sell with each passing quarter. The 50 Fathom story is the one that stings the dive watch community. That reference earned its reputation across decades. It was the benchmark for serious dive watch collecting below Rolex, a watch that photographers, military divers, and collectors pointed to as proof that tool watches could have soul. It still has the technical credentials. The movement specifications haven't changed. The case construction is still thoughtful. But credentials don't protect secondary prices when a conglomerate's pricing and distribution strategy undermines positioning across the entire portfolio. Swatch Group pushed upmarket without capturing the buyers who live there, and the market, as it always does, adjusted. The collectors who trusted Blancpain's identity are still holding the receipts. Blancpain's decline is slow. The next brand's is more dramatic and a little more personal for the collectors who loved it. 5. Piaget. In a 2mm mechanical watch, there is almost nowhere to hide. The movement has to be exceptional. The finishing has to be exceptional. Because at that thickness, everything is visible and everything matters. Piaget built a business on that principle for decades. The Altiplano Ultimate concept, which set the world record for the thinnest mechanical watch ever made, is a feat of engineering that most Swiss manufacturers couldn't attempt. The Piaget Polo's bracelet integration, the way the case flows into the links as a single architectural gesture, reflects years of design and production work that simply doesn't exist at the prices of comparable brands. So why is the Altiplano down 16.2% on the secondary market in 2025? Piaget dropped 12.5% overall that year, second worst among all tracked brands. The Polo collection fell 10%, the Altiplano more than 16%, and the answer isn't product failure. The product is, by any technical measure, extraordinary. The answer is audience. Ultra-thin watches require a collector who approaches them the way a person approaches a particular piece of furniture or a particular room, with patience, with knowledge, and with no expectation of being rewarded by anyone else in the room for their taste. That collector is rare, and while they're stable buyers, there aren't enough of them to absorb the secondary market inventory being shed by the other kind. The other kind bought Piaget because it was expensive and elegant, and the name felt right at a certain level of dinner party conversation. Those buyers didn't go deep. They went wide. And when luxury markets correct, as they did sharply from 2023 onward, those buyers exit first, exit quickly, and deposit their inventory into a secondary market that doesn't have enough devoted buyers waiting. The aspirational buyer is the most volatile buyer. They arrive when a brand is ascending. They leave when momentum stalls. And Piaget's momentum stalled. The ultra-thin market can't absorb the volume. The prices reflect it. The craft is still there. The watches are still extraordinary objects. But the buyer who understood that has always been outnumbered by the buyer who didn't. And right now, both groups are selling. What Piaget never quite solved is the attention problem. A 2mm watch is invisible in a crowd. The person who values that invisibility is exactly who Piaget should be making watches for. But they're a small group, and the brand spent 15 years trying to attract a larger one by raising prices and broadening its retail presence, which brought in aspirational buyers without converting them into devoted ones. You can't build lasting brand equity on buyers who leave when the mood shifts. Piaget found this out the hard way. The Altiplano is still the most technically accomplished, ultra-thin watch you can buy at any price. The market just doesn't reward being the best at something only a few people are looking for. Piaget lost its aspirational audience. What's next lost something harder to replace the trust of the collectors who knew it deepest. 4. IWC Schaffhausen. There was a moment, somewhere around 2012, when IWC made sense in a way that few brands at its price level did. The Pilot's watch Mark 16 retailed just under $3,000. It had a solid movement, a bold, legible dial with a history rooted in genuine aviation instrument design, and a simplicity that felt considered rather than lazy. It was the watch you recommended to someone who wanted to spend real money without performing wealth at anyone. Then the prices moved. The Mark XX, the current Pilot's watch entry point, retails around $5,000 in the United States. For that money, you can buy a Tudor Black Bay 58 with an in-house movement designed specifically for the case, a bracelet with better finishing detail, and secondary market performance that consistently outpaces IWC across comparable references. Tudor is owned by Rolex. Its movements are built in-house in Le Locle. The value proposition is stronger in almost every measurable direction. That comparison would have been impossible in 2012. IWC owned the middle tier. Tudor wasn't making watches that could credibly compete there. But Tudor invested heavily in movement development, and IWC raised prices. The gap closed, then it inverted. The Richemont data for the first half of 2025 shows IWC down 2.9% quarter over quarter. Quiet, unhurried decline. Not the kind that generates alarm, the kind that accumulates in spreadsheets until someone finally says it out loud. The Pilot's range, the Portugieser, the Portofino, each collection has a genuine identity and a real history behind it. The Portugieser in particular is one of the most elegant, large-case dress watches ever designed. None of that is in question. What's in question is whether the price now reflects the competition, and whether the collectors who once considered IWC their answer to "what should I buy for under $3,000" still have a reason to stand in that boutique. They don't. The brand priced them out, and the next buyer down the income scale looked at Tudor instead. There's a specific person this matters to. He's been into watches for maybe 5 years. He's past the Seiko phase, past the Hamilton phase. He's done the research, he knows what he wants, and he walks into an authorized dealer with $4,000 and a clear head. He could go Tudor. He could go used Omega. Or he could walk into IWC and feel the weight of the Portugieser in his hands and understand immediately why people argued about this brand for 30 years. In 2012, he would have walked out with the Portugueser and told everyone he knew about it for 6 months. In 2025, he checks Chrono 24 on his phone in the parking lot, sees what that Portugueser sells for pre-owned, and drives to the Tudor dealer instead. Not because he stopped caring about IWC, because the math stopped working, and IWC didn't notice. IWC lost its value story. The next brand on this list lost something more fundamental, what made it distinctive in the first place. 3. Vacheron Constantin. Vacheron Constantin was founded in Geneva in 1755. That makes it the oldest continuously operating watch manufacturer in the world, not the oldest watchmaking tradition. The oldest company, still running, still producing, still signing dials with the same name that appeared on pocket watches in the court of Louis XVI. That sentence has appeared in so many press releases and boutique placards that it's almost lost its weight. Almost. Because it is still, even accounting for marketing fatigue, an extraordinary claim, and for most of Vacheron's history, the watches justified it. The Patrimony, with its minimalist restraint and paper-thin case. The Overseas, a sports watch that somehow managed to feel elegant rather than athletic. The Les Cabinotières, one-of-a-kind commissions, built for individual clients, priced in the hundreds of thousands. The brand occupied a position at the very top of Swiss watchmaking that wasn't about aggression or status display, it was about arrival. You bought a Vacheron when the watch could finally be entirely about you. So, what happened to a 12.5% secondary market decline in 2024? Before someone calls that a market-wide correction, it wasn't. Rolex was up 1.6%. Patek was up 2.8%. Cartier was up 0.3%. Vacheron fell. The overseas expansion of the early 2020s captured collector enthusiasm for a moment. Then it came too fast. Too many references, too many variations, not enough patience between launches. The tonal cohesion that defines a serious collection, the sense that every piece belongs to the same long thought, started to blur. Some of the newer overseas models felt less like Vacheron thinking through its own identity, and more like Vacheron responding to what AP was selling. That's the most dangerous thing a heritage brand can do, not fail. Imitate. Because imitation tells your most loyal buyers that what they loved about you was never quite as singular as they believe. And those buyers don't raise their voices, they just stop showing up. Think about what it means to buy a Vacheron overseas, when the design brief was clearly, what can we do that responds to what the Royal Oak is doing? The Royal Oak exists. It already exists. It has existed since 1917 too. You cannot out-Royal Oak the Royal Oak. And trying to tells the collector two things they didn't want to know. That the brand is watching the competition instead of watching itself, and that the next generation of Vacheron pieces might follow the same logic. That's enough. That's all it takes to break the spell. The watches Vacheron made before this correction are still extraordinary objects. The Patrimony Contemporain, in particular, is the kind of piece that makes you understand why people spend 40 years building a collection. But the brand's direction over the last several years has added a question mark to every future purchase. And question marks are expensive when the watches cost $60,000. Vacheron lost its distinctiveness. What's at number 2 didn't just lose distinctiveness. Its own loyal buyers started asking whether it was still worth the ask. 2. Jaeger-LeCoultre. Watch collectors call Jaeger-LeCoultre the watchmaker's watchmaker. The credential behind that title is real. More than 1,200 calibers designed and built in Le Sentier since 1833. The Reverso, introduced in 1931, is one of the most elegant mechanical concepts ever attached to a wrist. A rectangular case that pivots on its own cradle so the dial faces inward, protecting the crystal during polo matches. A feature so specific to a world of monogrammed silver cases and Riviera summers that it somehow feels entirely relevant in 2025. The Atmos clock, which draws energy from temperature variations too small to perceive, is the kind of object that makes you rethink what precision actually means. So why is it down 8.5% in 2025? Down 3.1% in a single quarter? Why is a brand carrying this much legitimate craft losing nearly 1/10 of its secondary value in 12 months? The Richemont pattern. It's the same story as IWC, as Piaget, as Vacheron, a pricing strategy that moved faster than desire and left the secondary market to absorb the gap. The Reverso, which once represented outstanding value for a manually wound Swiss dress watch of this heritage, now retails at a level where the buyer asking why they're not purchasing a Patek Philippe Calatrava for a similar amount has a harder time being argued out of the question. But Jaeger-LeCoultre's case is specifically painful because of who its collector was. The person who chose JLC over Patek wasn't choosing down, they were choosing sideways. They were saying, I want extraordinary craft. I want a brand with more depth than the name recognition suggests, and I want the people who notice my watch to be the people worth impressing. That was a coherent, sophisticated position. It attracted a coherent, sophisticated collector. And that collector chose JLC because the price was part of the argument. The value proposition was explicit. More movement history than any brand on the planet, at a price below the Holy Trinity. Remove the price advantage, and the argument doesn't collapse, but it shrinks. And the collector starts doing the math they didn't need to do before. The Reverso still flips. The Grande complication models are still extraordinary. But the contract between the brand and the person who loved it has been rewritten by a spreadsheet, and that person is starting to look elsewhere. Jaeger-LeCoultre lost its price proposition. The brand at number one didn't just lose its proposition. Its own owners looked at their balance sheets, added up what they had, and cut the number in half. One Breitling. In December 2022, CVC Capital Partners sold a controlling stake in Breitling to Partners Group in a deal that reportedly valued the brand at $4.5 billion. At the time, it read as a clean handoff. Private equity to private equity, with the transformation story intact. George Clooney as brand ambassador. Boutiques opening in Dubai, Tokyo, Sydney. Wrist rolls of athletes and celebrities. Revenue growth that looked, from the outside, like a brand that had finally become what it was always supposed to be. Then the numbers came in. By early 2026, CVC had written down the value of its remaining Breitling stake to roughly half of what it was in 2023. Let that land. The people who owned the brand, not collectors, not forum members, not the journalists who covered the turnaround, but the investors with full access to every financial metric, every revenue figure, every boutique performance report, looked at Breitling and decided it was worth approximately half of what they thought 2 years prior. Retail sales fell from 1.2 billion Swiss francs to 1.1 billion. The boutique expansion that had looked like ambition now looked like overhead. But the write-down is the symptom. The collectors diagnosed the disease years earlier, walk into a gray market dealer and look at the Breitling wall. The Navitimer, the flagship, the watch with the circular slide rule bezel that appeared on pilots' wrists in 1952 and hasn't fundamentally changed since, trades pre-owned at 30 to 40% below retail on a good day. The Chronomat, the Super Ocean, the Avenger, all of them land in the same place on Chrono 24. Watches that left boutiques at $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 are listed a year later at $4,000 and $5,000. Not because anything broke, because that's what the honest market has decided they're worth. And then there's the Endurance Pro, a composite case, quartz movement watch with a rubber strap. Retail price, $3,500. That watch exists because a private equity firm saw a margin opportunity in a brand with name recognition. It sells. People buy it. But the watch community's response, visible across forums and deal threads with striking consistency, is essentially this: charging $3,500 for quartz and composite. Is what happens when the people running the brand care about revenue and don't wear watches. Leon Breitling founded the brand in 1884. Partners Group, which holds the majority stake today, was founded in 1996. Those two dates tell you something about who's making the decisions. The transformation that began when Georges Kern took over in 2017 produced real results. Revenue grew. The brand shed its image as the watch for aviation enthusiasts who didn't care about style. The lifestyle positioning felt, for a few years, like it might hold. But lifestyle branding requires continuous momentum. You need new ambassadors, new boutiques, new campaigns, new energy every year. When the broader luxury market corrected from its post-pandemic highs, and it corrected hard, with Swiss watch exports falling roughly 10% in 2024, the infrastructure became a weight the revenue couldn't carry. Partners Group now controls a brand their own financial statements say is worth significantly less than they paid. That is not a market fluctuation. That is the owners of the company, with every number in front of them, putting a precise figure on their mistake. Somewhere, the collector who bought a Navitimer B1 in 2019 because Breitling finally felt like it was becoming what it deserved to be, still wears it. The chronograph function still works exactly as it should. The in-house movement is actually good. The aviation heritage that stretches back to the Hoot Aviation Department in the 1940s is real and it's earned. None of that is disputed, but the watch on his wrist is worth 40% less than he paid for it. And the people who set that price and convinced him it was justified, they've already written it down and moved on. Which is the thing about private equity in the watch industry that the collector never quite internalizes until it's too late. The firm doesn't care about the Navitimer's slide rule. It doesn't have feelings about the Hoot Aviation Department, or the aeronautical heritage, or the fact that the chronograph inside the case is a better movement than the price suggests. It cares about the multiple on exit. When the multiple turns bad, the brand is a line item. The collector, and everything he believed about what he was buying, is the collateral damage. The brands that survive don't have the best marketing. They have the closest gap between what they charge and what you actually hold. When that gap widens, the secondary market narrows it, quietly, without drama. Every single time. So before you buy, check the pre-owned price. Not because every watch should be an investment, but because the secondary market is the one conversation in the watch world that nobody can spin. Drop the brand name below if you've been burned by one of these, or if something on this list is sitting on your wrist right now and you're doing the math. I want to know.